Be me, 34-year-old corporate strategy consultant at a prestigious firm in Seattle, engaged to Vincent for 8 months now, together for 3 years total. Everything in my life has been carefully constructed through deliberate choices and unwavering principles. Graduated top of my class in economics, built my career through sheer competence in a male-dominated field. Vincent is a software architect, makes good money, respects my career, supports my ambitions. We met at a mutual friend's dinner party where I initially dismissed him as another tech bro. He proved different, though. Actually listened when I talked, read the books I recommended, seemed genuinely committed to growth. The relationship worked because he understood that I wasn't going to compromise my values for anyone. I've always been clear about who I am and what I believe. Recently, I've been doing a lot of reading and thinking about the intersection of intimate relationships and systemic power dynamics. Something has been bothering me for months. This nagging feeling that even in our progressive relationship, there are structures of oppression I've been unconsciously participating in. Vincent and I have a healthy, intimate life, or so I thought. But I started noticing patterns, the way certain expectations existed, the unspoken assumptions about availability and obligation. Even in the most egalitarian relationship, I realized there are frameworks of patriarchal conditioning. Last Tuesday evening, I decided it was time to have a serious conversation about this. We're sitting in our apartment, the one we've been sharing for the past year, with its carefully curated modern furniture and the artwork we picked out together. Vincent is on the couch, reading a technical manual for some new framework his team is implementing. I'm reviewing a presentation for a client meeting, but my mind keeps drifting to the conversation I need to initiate. Vincent, we need to talk about something important, I say, closing my laptop with purpose. He looks up immediately, setting his book aside, giving me his full attention like he always does. Of course, what's on your mind? He asks, and I can see he's genuinely open and ready to listen. This is one of the things I've always appreciated about him, his willingness to engage in difficult conversations. I've been thinking a lot about the structure of our relationship, and specifically about the intimate aspects of it. I begin. I watch his face carefully. He looks curious, but not defensive, just attentive. I've come to realize that even in relationships like ours, where we're both committed to equality, there are still embedded patriarchal expectations around physical intimacy. Vincent nods slowly. Okay, I'm listening. What specifically are you concerned about? The entire framework of expected sexual availability within romantic relationships is rooted in patriarchal ownership concepts, I explain, feeling the clarity of my analysis. Even when both partners want to be equal, there's this underlying assumption that being in a relationship means consenting to an ongoing, intimate arrangement. I see, Vincent says, his expression thoughtful. Are you saying you feel pressured in our relationship? It's not about feeling pressured by you specifically, I clarify. It's about recognizing that the entire structure is problematic. The idea that romantic commitment includes an implicit ongoing consent to physical intimacy is fundamentally a patriarchal construction. Vincent shifts on the couch, his body language still open, but I can see he's processing this carefully. What would a non-patriarchal approach look like to you? He asks. This is why I chose him. He asks questions instead of getting defensive. I think we need to deconstruct the assumption entirely, I say, warming to the topic now. Intimacy should be completely divorced from relationship status. It should be an independent choice every single time without any expectations whatsoever. Isn't that already how consent works, though? Vincent asks. Every time should be a mutual choice. In theory, yes, but in practice there are expectations, I counter. If we go weeks without intimacy, there's a tension, an unspoken question about why, an assumption that something is wrong. That expectation itself is the problem. It's a patriarchal residue. Vincent is quiet for a long moment, really thinking about this. So, what are you proposing specifically for us? He finally asks. I think we should eliminate the expectation entirely, I say, feeling confident in my analysis. We should approach our relationship as a partnership of equals that doesn't include any assumptions about physical intimacy. if it happens, it should be completely spontaneous and free from any framework of expectation or obligation. I can see Vincent processing this. His face is hard to read. And you think this would make our relationship more equal? He asks. I think it would make our relationship actually equal, I respond. Right now, even with all our progressive values, we're still operating within a patriarchal template. I need you to understand this isn't about you personally. It's about dismantling oppressive structures even in our most intimate spaces. Vincent nods slowly. I appreciate you sharing this with me. This is clearly something you've thought about deeply. Can I have some time to process this? He asks. Of course, I say, feeling good about how the conversation went. I know it's a big shift in thinking. Over the next few days, Vincent is quieter than usual, clearly thinking through what we discussed. I give him space, understanding that unlearning patriarchal conditioning takes time. I'm actually proud of myself for having the courage to address this. At work, I'm leading a major project to restructure our client engagement model. My team is mostly men, which has never intimidated me. I've always known I was smarter and more strategic than most of them. There's David, who's been with the firm for a decade and clearly resents that I was brought in above him. There's young Trevor, who tries too hard to impress everyone. And there's Ramon, who's actually competent but lacks the strategic vision to lead. I'm in a meeting presenting my restructuring proposal to the senior partners. David keeps trying to poke holes in my analysis, asking questions designed to make me look unprepared. The revenue projections seem optimistic, he says. What's your confidence interval on these numbers? I don't miss a beat. The projections are based on a conservative estimate of a 15% conversion rate improvement. Our pilot program showed 23%, so if anything, I'm being pessimistic. I see him shrink back slightly. He has nothing. The senior partners approve my proposal with minimal changes. After the meeting, my colleague Jennifer catches up with me in the hallway. That was impressive in there. She says, David looked like he wanted to disappear. He should have done his homework, I reply. I don't have patience for people who try to undermine work they haven't bothered to understand. Jennifer laughs. You never do. That's why you're going to make partner before any of them. She's right. I'm on track for early partnership, youngest woman to achieve it at this firm. Everything I've built has been through competence and refusing to play by diminished expectations. That evening, Vincent asks if we can talk again. We sit down in the same spots on the couch, like we're recreating the scene from earlier in the week. I've been thinking a lot about what you said, Vincent begins, about patriarchal structures in relationships and the expectations around intimacy. And, I prompt, curious where he's landed on this, I think you're right that expectations can be problematic, he says carefully, and I've been reflecting on my own conditioning and assumptions. I feel a surge of satisfaction he's actually engaged with this seriously. I'm glad you've been really thinking about it, I say. I have been, Vincent continues, and I've realized that you've helped me see something important about how I've been approaching our relationship. I've been operating under a lot of assumptions that I didn't examine. This is exactly what I hoped for, genuine growth and examination. The thing is, Vincent says, and his tone shifts slightly, becomes more measured, I've realized that those assumptions extended beyond just intimacy. I've been assuming a lot of things about what marriage would mean, about partnership, about building a life together. I'm nodding, encouraging him to continue, though something in his tone is making me slightly uneasy. I thought I understood what we were building together, but I'm realizing now that we have fundamentally different views on what a romantic partnership is. Wait, where is this going? What do you mean? I ask. We've always aligned on the big things. I thought so too, Vincent says. But intimacy isn't a small thing to me. It's one of the primary things that distinguishes a romantic partnership from a friendship. That's exactly the patriarchal conditioning I'm talking about, I interject. The idea that romance and physical intimacy are necessarily linked is a constructed association. Maybe it is constructed, Vincent acknowledges, but it's also what I want in a romantic relationship. I've spent the last few days really examining whether that makes me problematic or whether it's just a fundamental compatibility issue. My chest is tightening. This isn't going the direction I expected. You can unlearn these associations, I say, hearing the edge in my voice. That's the whole point of doing this work. I've thought about that, Vincent says quietly, but I've also thought about whether I want to. I respect your framework and your analysis. I really do. But I don't think I can build a marriage on it. The words hit me like cold water. You're saying you won't even try to examine your conditioning? I ask, incredulous. I'm saying I have examined it deeply, and I've realized that what you're calling conditioning is actually a core part of what I need in a romantic relationship. Vincent runs his hand through his hair, a gesture I've seen 1,000 times when he's stressed. I love you, he says, but I don't think I can marry someone who views intimacy as a patriarchal imposition. That's not fair, I say, feeling panic rising. You're reducing my entire argument to a caricature. I'm not trying to, Vincent says. I'm trying to be honest about what I need and what I think we're compatible on. We can work through this, I insist. You just need more time to understand the theory. I don't think time is going to change this, Vincent says, and there's a finality in his voice I've never heard before. Are you seriously suggesting we end our engagement because you won't examine your patriarchal conditioning? I demand. I'm suggesting we end our engagement because we have incompatible views on what a marriage should be, Vincent corrects. He's so calm, so measured, and it's infuriating because he's using all the communication techniques we learned in couples counseling. This is ridiculous, I say, standing up, needing to move. You're throwing away 3 years because of your investment in patriarchal structures. I see it differently, Vincent says, still sitting, still calm. I think you've decided that a fundamental aspect of romantic relationships is oppressive, and I don't share that view. We can't build a marriage on that gap. I'm pacing now, my mind racing through arguments and counter-arguments. So, what? You need a woman who will be available to you on demand? Is that it? I snap. That's not what I said, and you know it, Vincent responds, and now I hear a bit of edge in his voice too. I need a partner who views intimacy as a positive, part of our connection, not as a problematic patriarchal obligation to be deconstructed. Those two things are not mutually exclusive, I argue. Maybe not in theory, Vincent says, but in practice, you've just told me that you want to eliminate any expectation of intimacy from our relationship. That's a deal breaker for me for marriage. I need to be honest about that. The conversation continues in circles for another hour, but his position doesn't change. He's thought this through. He's made up his mind. By the time we both go to bed, separately, in different rooms, nothing is resolved. I lie awake most of the night, my mind churning through everything. How did trying to create a more equal relationship lead to this? The next morning, Vincent is up early, already dressed when I emerge from the bedroom. I'm going to stay at my brother's place for a few days, he says. I think we both need some space. We need to work through this, not run away from it. I counter. I'm not running away, Vincent says. I'm giving us both time to think clearly. He leaves with a small bag, and the apartment feels enormous and empty. I call my best friend Rachel, needing to talk this through with someone. Rachel and I have been friends since college. She's a civil rights attorney, one of the few people I trust completely. He's really ending things over this? Rachel asks after I explain the situation. Apparently, his attachment to patriarchal relationship structures is stronger than his commitment to growth. I say bitterly. There's a pause on the line. Can I ask you something without you getting defensive? Rachel says carefully. Warning bells go off, but I say, sure. What were you hoping would happen when you proposed this change? Rachel asks. I was hoping we could build a more equitable relationship, I say, obviously. Right, but practically speaking, Rachel presses, what did you envision your intimate life looking like? I envisioned it being free from expectation and obligation, I explain, spontaneous and chosen every time without any framework of entitlement. Okay, Rachel says slowly, and did you consider that Vincent might experience that as rejection or as you not wanting him? That's his conditioning talking, I respond. The idea that lack of sexual availability equals lack of desire is patriarchal. Maybe, Rachel says, but it's also pretty human to want to feel desired by your partner. I do desire him, I protest. That's not what this is about. But you want to remove all expectations of expressing that desire, Rachel points out. Can you see how, from his perspective, that might feel like a pretty significant withdrawal? Why are you taking his side? I demand, feeling betrayed. I'm not taking sides, Rachel says. I'm trying to help you see the perspective of someone you love. We end the call shortly after. I'm too agitated to continue the conversation productively. I throw myself into work, leading the implementation of my restructuring plan. The project is complex, requiring buy-in from multiple departments and careful change management. David continues to be obstructionist, questioning my decisions in meetings and trying to undermine my authority with the team. In a team meeting, he raises concerns about the timeline. I don't think this is realistic, he says, pointing to the project schedule. We're setting ourselves up for failure. The timeline is ambitious but achievable, I counter, unless you're saying your team isn't capable of meeting these benchmarks. It's a calculated move, putting him in a position where disagreeing makes him look incompetent. My team is capable, David says tightly. I'm questioning the overall strategic approach. The partners have approved the strategic approach, I remind him. At this point, we're in execution mode, not strategy debate. I see Ramon and Trevor exchange glances. David is clearly losing the room. After the meeting, I'm reviewing implementation details when I get a text from Vincent. Can we meet tomorrow evening to talk? There are things we need to decide. I agree, hope flickering that maybe he's reconsidered. The next evening, Vincent comes back to the apartment. He looks tired, like he hasn't been sleeping well either. We sit down, and I'm ready to find a compromise, to work this out. I've been doing a lot of thinking, Vincent begins, and I've talked to my therapist about this. Of course he's been talking to his therapist, processing everything properly. I care about you deeply, he continues, but I don't think we should get married. Even though I've been bracing for this, hearing him say it definitively makes my stomach drop. I think we want fundamentally different things from a romantic partnership, Vincent says, and I don't think either of us should compromise on something this important. So that's it? I ask. You're just giving up? I'm being honest about our incompatibility. Vincent says, I think that's more respectful than dragging this out. I've already contacted the venue and most of our vendors. We'll lose the deposits, but I'll cover those costs. He's already started canceling the wedding. He's been planning this. You've already made all these decisions without even trying to work through this with me, I say, anger rising. We did try to work through it, Vincent says. We had multiple conversations, and we're at an impasse. An impasse you created by refusing to examine your conditioning, I shoot back. You can frame it that way if you need to, Vincent says, but from my perspective, you declared that a fundamental aspect of our relationship was patriarchal oppression and needed to be eliminated. I'm allowed to not want to build a marriage on that foundation. The conversation goes in circles again, but the outcome is the same. Vincent starts moving his things out over the next week. We'll need to deal with the lease and the shared belongings, all the practical unraveling of a shared life. I tell people at work that the wedding is off, keeping it brief and professional. Jennifer is sympathetic. I'm so sorry. Are you okay? I'm fine, I say. It's better to figure out incompatibilities before marriage than after. I mostly believe this, or I'm trying to. What bothers me most is the feeling that I was right about the analysis, but somehow ended up losing everything. How did having the moral and intellectual high ground result in this outcome? I pour myself into the restructuring project, working 12-hour days. The implementation is going well overall. My timelines are being met. The early results are positive. But David continues to be a problem, and I'm starting to notice that he's coordinating with Ramon and Trevor. They're having meetings I'm not included in, making decisions about implementation details without consulting me. In a status update with the partners, David presents some modifications to my plan. We've identified some inefficiencies in the original approach, he says, and we've developed some optimizations. I'm blindsided. This is my project, and he's presenting modifications without my approval. These changes weren't reviewed with me, I say sharply. I'm the project lead. You've been difficult to reach, David says smoothly, and we needed to move quickly on these issues. It's a lie. I've been responsive to every message, but he's framing it like I've been absent. One of the partners, Gerald, looks between us. These optimizations look sound, and if they improve efficiency, I don't see the issue. The issue is process and leadership structure, I say, trying to keep my voice level. We can't have team members making strategic modifications without coordination. The modifications are tactical, not strategic, David counters, and they're within the scope of my team's implementation responsibilities. He's technically right. The changes are within his domain. But this is clearly a coordinated move to undermine my authority. After the meeting, I confront David directly. What you're doing is transparent, I tell him. You're trying to take credit for my project. I'm trying to make sure the project succeeds, David says, which requires flexibility and team collaboration. Collaboration would involve keeping the project lead informed, I snap. I've kept you informed, David says. You're CC'd on all the relevant emails. He's covering his bases procedurally while still undermining me, and he's good at it. I realized that while I was dealing with my personal life falling apart, David was building a coalition. Ramon and Trevor are now effectively reporting to him on implementation details, coordinating through him instead of me. I try to reassert control, calling a meeting with the three of them to realign on roles and responsibilities. There seems to be some confusion about decision-making authority, I begin. I don't think there's confusion, David says. I think there's been an evolution in how we're collaborating as the project has moved from planning to execution. An evolution that happened without any discussion with the project lead, I counter. We've been having daily stand-ups, Ramon offers. You're welcome to join them. We sent you the calendar invites. I check my calendar. He's right. There are invites, but they're scheduled for 7 a.m. before I typically start my day. It's technically inclusive while being practically exclusive. The issue isn't access to meetings, I say. The issue is strategic modifications being made without appropriate review. I'm happy to review any decisions you think need your input, David says with exaggerated courtesy. Just send me a list of what needs your approval and we'll route everything through you. It's a trap. If I list specific things, I'm micromanaging. If I don't, they'll continue making decisions without me. These men have played this game before. They know exactly what they're doing. I try escalating to Gerald, requesting a meeting to discuss project governance. I'm concerned that the implementation team has started operating independently of the strategic framework, I tell him. David gave me the impression that you've been somewhat disconnected from the day-to-day, Gerald says. That's not accurate, I respond. I've been fully engaged, but there are coordination issues. Look, Gerald says, leaning back in his chair, the project is performing well, the metrics are good, the client is happy. If there are personality conflicts on the team, I need you to manage those. That's part of leadership. He's putting this on me, framing it as a personality issue rather than a structural problem. This isn't about personality, I insist. This is about maintaining strategic coherence. Then maintain it, Gerald says. You're the project lead, but my authority has been eroded, and everyone knows it. David and his coalition have positioned themselves as the executors while framing me as the theorist who's lost touch with practical implementation. In meetings with the client, David increasingly takes the lead on presenting updates. He's smooth and confident, presenting our progress while subtly positioning himself as the driving force. I try to reestablish my presence, but I'm aware of how it looks, like I'm competing for credit rather than leading. The project succeeds, the restructuring is implemented effectively, the client is pleased. But in the post-project review, David gets most of the credit. David really drove the execution phase, Gerald says in the partner meeting, showed great leadership stepping up when needed. I'm acknowledged for the strategic framework, but it's clear that David has won the political battle. He's positioned for advancement while I've been tactically outmaneuvered. I'm sitting in my apartment alone, the apartment that used to be ours, that Vincent has fully moved out of now, trying to understand how everything fell apart simultaneously. My relationship ended because I tried to create a more equitable structure. My project was co-opted by men who used procedural tactics to undermine my authority. In both cases, I was intellectually and morally right, but I still lost. Rachel comes over with wine, concerned about how I'm doing. I've been better, I admit, which is more vulnerability than I usually show. I'm worried about you, Rachel says. You seem like you're in a dark place. I'm fine, I insist. I'm just processing some professional and personal setbacks. The thing with Vincent really hurt you, Rachel observes. I can see it. He chose patriarchal conditioning over growth, I say. That's his limitation, not mine. Do you really believe that? Rachel asks gently. What else am I supposed to believe? I snap. That I should have just accepted his framework of relationship expectations? I think you could believe that two people can have different needs and neither is wrong, Rachel suggests. But his needs were rooted in problematic structures, I argue. Maybe, Rachel says, or maybe intimacy just means different things to different people, and that's okay. You sound like you're saying I should have compromised my principles, I say coldly. I'm saying that principles are important, but so are relationships, Rachel responds, and sometimes the application of a principle can be more complicated than the principle itself. I don't want to hear this. I don't want to examine the possibility that I was wrong. Because if I was wrong about Vincent, what does that mean about everything else? After Rachel leaves, I'm alone with my thoughts again. I keep replaying the conversation where I first raised the issue with Vincent. I was so certain of my analysis, so confident that I was identifying a real problem. And maybe I was identifying something real, but maybe my solution was wrong. Or maybe Vincent just wasn't evolved enough to understand. That's possible too. I don't know anymore, and the uncertainty is worse than anything. At work, I'm assigned to a new project. Smaller scope, less visibility. It's clear that my trajectory has been affected by what happened with the restructuring. David is leading the next major initiative, the position that should have been mine. I watch him in meetings, seeing the strategies I would have used, the arguments I would have made. He's competent enough, but not more competent than me. He just played the political game better, built alliances, made himself indispensable to the right people. I was so focused on being right that I didn't see the coalition building against me. Just like I was so focused on being right with Vincent that I didn't see him pulling away. One evening, I'm working late in the office. Most people have gone home. Trevor is still there, working on something at his desk. On impulse, I walk over to him. Can I ask you something? I say. He looks up, surprised. Sure. The restructuring project, I begin. When did you start coordinating with David instead of me? Trevor looks uncomfortable. I don't know if I'd characterize it like that. I'm not trying to put you on the spot, I say. I'm genuinely trying to understand what happened. He's quiet for a moment, then says, David started pulling me into meetings about a month into implementation. He positioned it as helping you with the workload, making sure execution details didn't bottleneck with you. And you didn't think to check with me about that? I ask. Honestly? Trevor says, you seemed pretty distracted and David seemed to have a clear handle on things. It seemed like a reasonable distribution of work. Distracted, he saw me as distracted during the period when my engagement was falling apart. I was trying so hard to keep it together, to not let my personal life affect my work, but it showed anyway. The early morning meetings, I say, those were deliberate, weren't they? Trevor shifts uncomfortably. David said you preferred to work later in the day, that you were more responsive to evening communications. It's technically true, I do work late, but it was still a deliberate exclusion tactic. And the modifications that David presented to the partners, I continue, those were developed in those early meetings. Yeah, Trevor admits. David had some good ideas about streamlining the workflow. I'm sure he did, I say. Thanks for being honest with me. I walk back to my office, understanding exactly how I was outplayed. David identified a moment of vulnerability, positioned himself as helpful rather than competitive, and built a shadow structure that gradually replaced my authority. It was strategic and effective, and I didn't see it coming because I was too caught up in my personal crisis. The realization that follows is worse. I created my own personal crisis. I initiated the conversation with Vincent that led to our breakup. I was the one who decided that our intimate life was a problem that needed to be deconstructed. Vincent was happy, we were happy, and I decided it wasn't good enough because it didn't align with my theoretical framework. I sit in my office, staring at my computer screen, feeling something crack inside. What if I was wrong? What if my analysis was academically interesting but practically destructive? What if I destroyed my own relationship in service to a principle that mattered more to me than the actual human being I loved? The thought is unbearable, but once it's there, I can't unthink it. I text Vincent, "Can we talk?" He responds the next day, "I'm not sure that's a good idea." I push, "Please, I need to talk to you." He agrees to meet for coffee, neutral territory. When I see him, he looks good, healthy, like the separation has been good for him. That hurts more than I expected. "Thanks for meeting me," I say as we sit down. "Of course," Vincent says. "How are you?" "Doing." "I've been thinking a lot about our last conversations," I begin, "about what I said about intimacy and expectations." Vincent waits, not offering anything. "I think I might have been wrong," I say, the words feeling like glass in my throat. "About what specifically?" Vincent asks carefully. "About applying a theoretical framework to our relationship without considering what we actually had," I say. I was so focused on identifying patriarchal structures that I didn't stop to ask if those structures were actually causing problems for us. Vincent is quiet, listening. "We were happy," I continue. "I was happy, and I decided that wasn't enough because it didn't conform to my analysis of how things should be." "I appreciate you saying that," Vincent says finally. "That takes a lot of self-awareness." "Does it change anything?" I ask, hearing the hope in my own voice. Vincent looks at me with something like sadness. "I don't think it does." The hope dies as quickly as it appeared. "The thing is," Vincent says gently, "even if you see it differently now, I spent weeks watching you analyze and deconstruct our relationship. I saw how you looked at our intimacy, like it was a problem to be solved rather than something we shared. I can't unsee that. And I can't build a marriage wondering when the next aspect of our life will be deconstructed. But I'm telling you, I was wrong," I insist. "Maybe," Vincent says, "or maybe you'll decide in a few months that you were right the first time and this is just a moment of doubt. I don't have confidence that your framework has changed. I think you've just realized that it had consequences you didn't want." He's right, and I know he's right, but I don't want him to be right. "What if I can change?" I ask. "I think you probably will change," Vincent says. "I think you'll grow and evolve, and I genuinely hope you find what you're looking for. But I don't think we're compatible for marriage. I didn't think so a month ago, and I still don't think so now." We talk for a while longer, but it's really just the denouement of something that's already over. When we part ways, it's with a finality that feels different from before. Before there was anger and accusation, now there's just sad acceptance. I walk back to my car and sit in it for a long time before I can drive. I've lost him, really lost him, not because of patriarchy or oppression, but because of my own choices. At work, I continue on the smaller project, doing good work, but without the visibility and trajectory I had before. David's project is successful. He's building his reputation while mine stagnates. I'm competent enough that I'm not in danger of losing my job, but the partnership track that seemed inevitable now seems unlikely. Months pass. The acute pain of the breakup fades into a dull ache. I date sporadically, but I find myself either over-explaining my principles and watching men's eyes glaze over, or hiding my principles and feeling like I'm being dishonest about who I am. Neither approach leads to anything substantial. Rachel and I have dinner. She's one of the few constants in my life. "I've been thinking about what happened with Vincent," I tell her. "Yeah," she prompts. "I think I confused being right with being wise," I say. "I was right that there are patriarchal structures embedded in relationship expectations. That's analytically true. But I wasn't wise about what to do with that truth. I treated my relationship like a theoretical problem instead of a living thing with a real person I loved." "That's pretty insightful," Rachel says. "What are you going to do with that insight?" "I don't know," I admit. "I can't undo what happened, and I don't even know if I would because I'm still not sure where the line is. Between principles and pragmatism, between refusing to compromise my values and being so rigid that I destroy everything good in my life." Rachel considers this. "Maybe the line is different in different situations. Maybe it's not about finding one rule, but about developing judgment." "I'm not good at that kind of ambiguity," I say. "I know," Rachel says with affection, "but maybe that's the growth opportunity." I think about this conversation a lot in the following weeks, about the difference between being right and being wise, about the way I approached Vincent with my analysis, so certain that I was identifying a problem, never stopping to ask if he experienced it as a problem, or if I was creating a problem by insisting one existed. At work, I noticed similar patterns in how I approach strategy. I'm good at identifying inefficiencies and structural issues, but I'm less good at building coalitions and bringing people along. I see problems and I want to fix them immediately, forcefully, without much patience for resistance. David succeeds not because he's smarter, but because he's better at making people feel included in solutions. He builds buy-in where I build resentment, even when my solutions are objectively better. It's a bitter pill to swallow, understanding that being right isn't enough, that in both love and work, how you navigate being right matters as much as being right. I'm sitting alone in my apartment on what would have been my wedding day. I didn't think I would remember the date, but of course I do. Thinking about the wedding that didn't happen, the marriage that won't be, the life with Vincent that I systematically dismantled in service to a principle. Was the principle worth it? I still don't know. I still believe that examining power structures in relationships is important. I still believe that expectations around intimacy can be problematic. But I also know that I lost something real and valuable, something I haven't been able to replace. Maybe some other woman will love Vincent and give him the kind of relationship he wants. The thought makes me feel hollow. Maybe she'll be less educated, less analytical, more willing to exist within traditional structures. Or maybe she'll just be wiser than me, able to hold principles without wielding them like weapons. I don't cry. I'm not much of a crier, but I feel the weight of all of it. The relationship I ended, the career trajectory I lost, the certainty I used to have about everything. I used to know exactly who I was and what I stood for. Now I'm less certain about everything except that certainty itself might have been the problem. My phone buzzes. It's a message from work. David's project has been selected for a major industry award. The firm is putting together a celebration. Everyone is invited. I'll go because not going would be noticed, would be seen as bitter. I'll congratulate David because that's what professionals do. And I'll watch him succeed where I should have succeeded, understanding exactly how and why it happened. Understanding that I was outmaneuvered not through any grand injustice, but through simple tactical superiority. He played the game better than me while I was too busy being right to notice I was losing. Just like Vincent made the tactical decision to leave before I could deconstruct our entire relationship into nothing. I thought my moral clarity gave me an advantage, but it turned out to be a vulnerability. People who are certain they're right don't watch for threats, don't build defenses, don't compromise. They just push forward, assuming their rightness will be its own justification, until they're alone, passed over, wondering how everyone else failed to see what was so obvious. I'm lying in bed that night, unable to sleep, replaying everything. The look on Vincent's face when I first explained my theory about intimacy. He was trying so hard to understand, to engage with my ideas, and I mistook his engagement for agreement, his love for pliability. I thought I was educating him, helping him grow, when really I was dismantling the foundation of our relationship. And he let me do it, listened patiently, considered it seriously, then made the rational decision to leave before I could finish deconstructing us into nothing. It was smart, actually, smarter than I gave him credit for. I was so focused on the intellectual content of our discussions that I missed the metagame he was playing. He was evaluating compatibility while I was trying to win an argument. Same thing happened with David and the project. I was focused on being right about the strategy, while he was playing a different game entirely, building relationships, creating dependencies, positioning himself as indispensable. When I finally noticed, it was too late. The coalition was built. My authority was undermined. And the most bitter part is that I can see it all so clearly now, in retrospect. I can analyze exactly how I was outmaneuvered, can identify each tactical error I made, but that clarity doesn't change anything. Doesn't undo any of it. It just means I get to fully understand my own defeat, which might be worse than losing while still thinking you were right. I wonder sometimes if Vincent thinks about me, if he ever doubts his decision, or if he's moved on completely, happy that he escaped before I could reduce our entire relationship to a theoretical exercise. I wonder if David knows how deliberately he undermined me, or if he just followed his instincts for political maneuvering. I wonder if anyone else sees the patterns I see, or if I'm the only one analyzing everything to death. Maybe that's the real problem, the analysis itself. Maybe normal people just live their lives without constantly examining the structures and power dynamics. Maybe that's why they're happier, why they build things instead of deconstructing them. But I don't know how to be that person, how to turn off the part of my brain that sees systems and wants to optimize them. Even now, even after everything, I'm analyzing my own failure, looking for the lesson, the framework, the principle I can extract from this experience. Instead of just feeling it, just accepting that I fucked up and lost things that mattered. Rachel would tell me I'm overthinking it, that I need to just feel my feelings. Vincent would probably agree, would say something gentle about how not everything needs to be solved or understood, but they're both talking about a version of me that doesn't exist. I am someone who overthinks, who analyzes, who needs frameworks and principles. The question is whether I can be that person without destroying everything around me, whether I can hold my convictions without wielding them as weapons, whether I can be right without needing everyone else to acknowledge it. I don't have answers to these questions. I just have the wreckage of what I've lost and the clarity of understanding exactly how I lost it, which has to count for something, even if I'm not sure what, even if it doesn't bring back Vincent or restore my career trajectory. Even if all it does is make me slightly wiser and significantly more alone. Maybe that's the trade-off. Maybe wisdom is just the consolation prize for experience. Maybe I'll use this understanding to build something better in the future. Or maybe I'll just keep making the same mistakes with better self-awareness. Either way, I'm here, in this apartment, on what should have been my wedding day, understanding that I valued being right more than being happy, and having to live with the consequences of that choice, which feels less like a moral victory and more like just being wrong in a different way.